Can you fix it so it's just on the other one?
Do you want it just on that?
Yeah. Otherwise someone might have an epileptic fit or something. Thank you. I think we'll start. Hi, welcome everyone to this Killer Girls session. My name's Emily Anderton and I'll be facilitating our conversation with Michelle and Catherine today. So we're here to talk about this amazing internship that they had, Michelle in 2011 and Catherine just earlier this year. I'll just briefly introduce these talented women. Michelle Savill is a writer and director. She's made 3 very successful short films. Betty Van Sweets was her first short, that right, which toured a raft of international festivals. And then Elaine Rides Again premiered at the New Zealand International Film Festival and then also went on to play at Cork, very respected international film festival. And then your latest short, Alan is Leaving, was in the Best of New Zealand selection in the last festival. And you also work for Galen Preston. Yeah. And when I asked Script to Screen why Michelle was selected for this amazing opportunity, I was told that it was because she has a completely distinctive voice and she's someone driven to make things. And as well as that, she's also smart, likeable, and very real. So welcome, Michelle. Thanks for sharing your experiences with us. And Catherine is also a writer and director of short films. She made 2 self-funded shorts, The Fish Will Swim and Orn Motel, both successful, and Orn Motel just recently played in the New Zealand Film Festival. And she's also had a radio play produced by Radio New Zealand, has several feature scripts in development, and is about to make a premiere short later this month. Script to Screen told me that her feature script was visual, gritty, and had amazing characterisation, and that they were impressed with her ability to speak with intelligence and fluency. So there we go. Welcome, Catherine. Thanks very much for sharing your experiences. The Script to Screen Screenwriting Internship with Killer Films was set up in 2008, following other successful internships with Working Title and Box Films in the UK. It involves spending 3 months working for the very busy production house Killer Films in New York City. And just before we proceed, Catherine and Michelle asked me to thank Script to Screen, the Film Investment Corporation Foundation, the New Zealand Film Commission, and also Chris Parkin at the Museum Hotel for all their help in getting them to New York and helping them along the way. So I thought we'd start just introducing Killer, because many of you will be very familiar with the company, some of you may not have heard of it, so it's worth just running through who they are. They're a New York City-based independent film production company, which means that they're producers. They're not part of a studio or financiers. They make films, develop films, and finance each one separately. And it was founded by 2 women, Christine Vachon and Pamela Koffler, in 1995. You can see, this is off their Facebook site. These are a lot of the films that they've been involved in, and you can immediately understand who they are from looking at those films. Amazing collection of successes and groundbreaking US indie movies. And that's what they're associated with, is edgy and original content and forming great relationships with directing talent. So they're well known for having had a long association with Todd Haynes from his early work such as Poison and Safe in the early 90s, through to Far From Heaven, I'm Not There, and the recent Emmy Award-winning mini-series adaptation of Mildred Pierce, which I think played on Soho here and I guess is going to wash up on Prime sometime in the next decade. You can also tell from looking at those films they've had a long association with queer cinema and also, or just any cinema that's pushing the boundaries of sexuality and really bringing that into the mainstream. You can see out there Boys Don't Cry, Hedwig and the Angry Inch. So throughout the 90s and the noughties, they sought out controversial, boundary-pushing in the original. Just to point out a few more, Kids, Happiness, Savage Grace, and they made a really outstanding success of it. I mean, you could tell that by the fact that they're still going. That in itself is a huge achievement, but the number of really risky films that they made that you'd actually know of and recognise, and that in itself shows you what an amazing nose for talent and incredible determination that they must have. So, but we're now entering the 2000 and something else's, and everyone recognises it is a tougher and a different world for indie filmmaking. the goldmine rush of Sundance years is kind of over. The mini studios are kind of over. The DVD recruitment boom is just about over. And piracy is wiping out many forms of income return for indie movies. So it's a new era. And I'm really excited to find out about Michelle and Catherine's experiences with colour at this kind of crossover point, how they're surviving and how they're looking to the future to keep going, keep this amazing company up and running and making movies. But I'd really like to start with just hearing about what it was like being a New Zealand filmmaker, arriving in New York and being thrust into this sort of intense world. Michelle, can you talk us through your first day at Killer?
Yeah, so I was just given the address and told to show up, and I had asked if there were any projects that they were in development with that I could read before I got there. So I had a few scripts that I'd read to prepare, and of course I'd try to watch everything that the company had made ever. And I just got there and the office was going crazy. I think something had happened with some film, and I ended up waiting for about an hour before David Kaplan, who was then the head of development, could see me. And he just said, "Oh, it's such a bad day. Here's a script, like go home and come back tomorrow." So I was like, cool. So that was my first day, so I left. But it was kind of nice because I got to see the office and wander around.
What was the office like?
Well, it's this tiny wee room that's windowless, and to get there you have to walk through another flash office, which is Moxie Pictures, which is kind of an advertising music video company. So their office is super, super nice. And you have to go through that, which kind of teases you. And then you like go down these stairs, and then you go through another office, which is Search Party. And they do music for film. And they're headed by this guy, Randall Poster, who's the music supervisor on a ton of films. And most recently, he does all of Wes Anderson's films. And they're, at the moment, they were doing music on like Boardwalk Empire and a lot of HBO TV series. So you go through their office, which is just piled with CDs, and they've got a really cool office too. And then you arrive in this teeny little room that has no windows. Well, it does, but the window opens onto a brick wall. It's like an inch there. And the arrangement is Pam and Christine sit across from each other, and when I was there, it was Gabby, who was their assistant, David, who was head of development, and then there was one desk at the end that had 5 interns kind of crowded around with their laptops, all trying to work. So that's what the office is like. And you don't talk, and it's Pam and Christine are on the phone always, and, they're the ones who talk, of course. Right. I just ended up, when I was there, they developed a system where there was an even tinier room with no windows behind this.
The cupboard?
Yeah. So there was a cupboard, and they ended up putting the interns in there and then kept one intern in the room to help answer phones. And I was lucky enough to be that one intern because I had phone skills and none of the others did. So I just hung out there and read scripts and did errands, which was awesome because I got to see New York, and it was so nice to get out of the office and wander around town and
be able to speak.
Be able to talk and just kind of take the metro, and so it was a lot of fun. And that was pretty much my time there.
Catherine, was your first day pretty similar? Was the cupboard still extant?
I didn't go to the cupboard office, so I managed to avoid that for sort of 6 weeks, because my internship was slightly different. So I went and I did, Diana Foymana did the same internship as Michelle, and then I came second, and then they took pity on me and said they were going to send me somewhere, and I was like, I'm going to go to Auckland or Australia, maybe if I'm lucky. And then fortunately it turned out to be New York as well. So I turned up in New York. I actually had a similar first day experience to Michelle in that I went to meet someone from Killer, and there was this kind of something was happening in the production office that they really wanted to avoid, so this sort of figure sort of crept up and sort of waved at me, and I had to scurry out so they didn't have to run into the director. It was sort of very tense. And I was sent away and read some scripts, but my first proper day in the production office was really fascinating because it was this big space in Chelsea, but it was all open plan and it was just crammed, filled with people. So there were all the AD department, the DOP was interviewing camera assistants. There was the production office manager who was lovely. I sat right by her, but then she had an assistant who was just this nasty dragon who was constantly sort of giving all the interns hell. And yeah, and it was kind of being in this office, and the art department were there, and they were looking through swatches of material and colours, and there were props. There were all these. The film I worked on was called Kill Your Darlings, and it's about the Beach Poets. So it's an origin story about how Allen Ginsberg goes to New York, meets up with Jack Kerouac, William Burroughs, and there's a young charismatic man called Lucian Carr, who sort of brings them all together and then sort of busts it all apart when he murders his lover and gets off because he claims he was attacked by a homosexual. So anyway, it's the Beat Poets, and they're out, they're drinking a lot, they're doing drugs. So there were lots and lots of old whiskey bottles being washed out, and there were sort of great costumes coming in and out of the costuming area, lots of sailor pants, and because it's set during the war. So it was just this really fascinating bustle of stuff going on, and I was sitting there right in the middle of it. Fortunately, I didn't have to deal with the assistant dragon. I was doing stuff for Killer because I was the Killer person on the ground. They were back in the office, which is by Union Square. So I was sitting there getting to do things. The first thing I got to do, which was really exciting, was I composed an email to David Cross from Arrested Development. I got to compose an email to his agent. I didn't actually get to send it, but I sort of did that, and that was my one moment of being really starstruck, and then I kind of got over it. But yeah, so it was just this huge amount of activity and being thrown right into the middle of a feature film that was going to go into production, and I think it was a Monday, and they started shooting the next Friday.
And so you just had to be on hand to
Yeah.
do whatever.
Yeah, so I composed emails, I organised the opening party for the cast, like getting the names together for who got to go.
Oh, that's a position of power.
It was a little bit. I found myself a little bit popular on the first day because people were trying to get on the list. But it was false because I had to check with someone else in the end. But you know,
Yeah.
So doing that, they didn't have a script supervisor, which is a position that often in New Zealand it's not given as much prominence, but in America they're like one of the best paid on set, and they're very important. So they didn't have a script supervisor going into this production. And it was a union shoot, so in America they have very strong unions, and as soon as you hit a certain budget level, you have to hire union crews and pay them union rates. For really smaller films, they let it pass because obviously low-budget filmmaking can't necessarily support what the union wants. So I had to go through IMDb, finding out all the script supervisors that were working in New York, what they'd worked on recently, whether or not it looked like that film would suggest they might want to work on Kill Your Darlings, which was a smaller production. Also making sure that they'd worked in the last 2 years. That was quite an enlightening thing to see that if they hadn't worked recently, no one was interested in having them to do with the film. So it was very fascinating getting to do a task like that, which really spoke to the industry and how it worked. Introducing me to concepts like the unions
and being active all the time,
Yeah.
being there or not being there.
being there and just what is required of a career path.
Yeah. And well, while you're talking about Kill Your Darlings, you then went out and did some work on set, right?
Yeah, I did.
Do you want to show us your pictures?
I have a little set slideshow. Oh, general New York slideshow, which is at some point silly, but so I'd never been to New York before, so it was very exciting being there on the streets filming. So that photo that just went, that's up around Columbia University. So all the trucks and everything going on. This is in Harlem. So it was really fun. We used to Hall, which is in the East Village. So it was kind of being on a film set, but also getting a big tour of New York City at the same time. This is at Columbia University. This is me working with, so at the back there's a bodyguard, there's a proper bodyguard, and then me who kind of had to shield, because Daniel Radcliffe was in the film, so I had to do some shielding from not only crazy fans, but also from the paparazzi, that you can see here, who caused lots of problems for production. Then this is inside on set, an integral part of life, eating lots of sugary American snacks, like M&M's and Snickers bars, so not very different. Yeah. This is up in Inwood, which is in about 200 Street in Manhattan. So it was a night shoot, and it was a really fantastic thing being there for the whole part of the process and just getting to see everything that went down, and also just being there and seeing things like the George Washington Bridge, which is up here now, and seeing it at dusk in the middle of the night, and then in the very early morning. So these sort of iconic New York landmarks. And then one day I spent the whole day sitting by this truck watching it.
Why were you sitting by a truck all day?
I was kind of like pseudo-security. So yeah, I'm not quite sure what I would have done if someone had come and tried to do something to the truck, because I'm not particularly tough. And I had no weapon on me. So yeah, I just got to sit here and watch the street go by.
Did you just tell me before that you had to one night spend the night in Central Park?
I did. I had to spend an hour in Central Park one day. Yeah, it was midnight. I got sent to Central Park to sit by a set that had been prepped. So the gaffers and electrics had been in. The Griffin electrics had been in, and I just got to go and sit in this middle of an isolated clearing in Upper Central Park, and sort of raccoons running around, and watch these lights until they decided they couldn't make it out to the set because they'd run out of time. So my efforts were in vain, but nothing was stolen. And then I got to hang out in the park while all the grips and then the electrics sort of struck the set. So it was interesting. But all those sort of things. I mean, there were definitely, and Michelle will talk about this as well, when you go on this internship, it's like you are being an intern, and being an intern is you're on the bottom rung, so you get to see all this stuff, but then it's also very, you're doing tasks like standing watching trucks, or standing in Central Park, or fetching coffees, or getting salt, or there's just,
It's glamorous.
It is very glamorous. Yeah, anyway, so watching trucks, it's just walkie relay one day, the locations, the background holding that they'd found wasn't within walkie range, so I had to go and sit on the spot for 6 hours and relay any messages, because I was at the point where the signals met, and people thought I was very important because I got to sit on a director's chair, so I came up and tried to sort of get cast and sell the script. And then this was an exciting thing, one day finishing up and walking past the East Village Cinema and seeing Boy right up on the right was showing. So that was really cool. And actually Good for Nothing played as well. So it was great. The other thing, going on errands around the streets of New York, you just see New York, sort of the iconic things, and then also things like Super Magic Fingers and cappuccino and tattoo and cheap divorce. So there's kind of always fascinating things going on. I mean, everything about New York is really true, and the professional side of the internship was great, but also just being in New York, and it's a very inspiring and interesting place, and so diverse, and every cliche you can think of, I will not rattle them off. The food, onion rings, you need to look at the coffee cup size and the fork size to realise quite how huge they were, so the excesses of America. This is the tech recce. So I got to go on that, which was really great. It was a chance to go and meet all the heads of departments before filming started. So watching them. So in here, the production designer is pulling back the layers of carpet in this really droppy apartment to find this wonderful carpet at the bottom that they ended up using in the actual shoot. So that was great. But then in the next room, they decided they had to get rid of these curtains. Yeah, and then being on a rooftop, just we got locked on this rooftop and thought we were going to have to take this fire escape down, but fortunately we didn't. And then things, going back to the unions. So the unions are really, really strong in New York, not just in film, but in all other areas. And if you're a film production that breaks union rules in some ways, they come up with this large blow-up rat outside outside your production, which is quite a cool thing. There were lots of blow-up rats, but not for our production, fortunately. They were just real rats. There were lots and lots of rats. I had to scare off some rats at some stage. Yeah. Anyway, Michelle.
Okay.
I can work it if you want.
This is just, we were just going to show you guys some photos of some other films that Killer had been working on or worked on when we were there, which are maybe lesser known. So when I was there, they had EP'd this documentary called Dragon Slayer on that skater guy whose name is Screech. And it was just a really cool documentary about him realizing he had to grow up and look after his son, and it won the documentary section at Sundance. And I don't know, it was just cool to see the range of types of films that they help and support. And then while I was there, they were location scouting for a film called Magic Magic by Sebastian Silva. And he made The Maid and some other films, but I've only seen The Maid, which is amazing, and I was really excited about that film coming out. And I think it's coming out this year or maybe next year.
So they shot it while I was there. It was incredible. When I was in New York for 3 months, they just finished a film called Deep Powder. They shot Kill Your Darlings. Then they shot Magic Magic. Then they shot an improvised comedy called Dealing with Idiots. Then they
and then they were shooting Innocence?
Then they shot Innocence. That was just after I left. So within that small frame of time, the volume of movies that they got through, that they were involved with in some ways. Some of them, I mean, actually all of them, like being the lead producers. So.
Yeah, it's just amazing how much like a small office.
So how did they do it, Michelle? You were in the office the whole time. How did they pull that off? 5 movies in 1 year.
You know, even after being there, I don't even know. They work hard and
there are 4 staff.
They're passionate.
2
there's
producers,
4 staff,
a development head, and 1 assistant.
Yeah.
And 5 interns.
Yeah. So I mean, the day-to-day runnings of the office is, you know, like what the interns can do, kind of that low-level stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, Pam and Christine, like they're amazing. They just work the phones and they've got excellent relationships with agents and distributors and finances and of course their directors who are like their core focus, and they're so passionate about what they're doing. They'll just do anything.
And what's their dynamic between them? Are they both pretty similar, or do they bounce off each other? Or?
From what I saw, that they both kind of have their own projects they're passionate about, but they support one another in the projects and where they need help.
Right, but each one will have a different project.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Right.
But it's quite good when you're in the position of being the intern there, because there's a lot of, they talk to each other about how the other person's project is going and giving input.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean...
Well, that's why they work directly across each other. They don't have their own offices, because they just need to be able to talk,
Right.
like listen, answer.
So what are they talking about?
Well, they're talking about a whole lot of things that we can't talk about in this context. Because we had a bleeper. But they're talking with their lawyers, their financiers, they're talking with the directors, with people they're co-producing with. So they're talking over a whole range of issues, and they're very open. So you're there right beside this woman talking with a lawyer about some big legal thing that is happening, and you kind of get to see how that came about. You hear the whole, them talking through it. So it was quite incredible. I don't think there's any other way of getting that close to that information without being Christine Vachon or the lawyer.
Yeah. And it's quite cool. Like on top of all that, they have families and kids, and I don't know, it was quite inspiring. It was just like, wow, you actually can do heaps in one day. Like I kind of sometimes think like, if I just do my laundry today, it's a good day. But it's like, nah, you can do 5 films.
Right. Yeah. Wow. And what intrigues me about producers in New York is there's no soft money. It's not like here or in Europe. Even the studios have less money for indie films now. So how are they getting the money to make these films?
There's a lot of independent finances.
Yeah, so Kill Your Darlings was financed entirely by one guy called Michael Benaroya.
And who was that guy?
He's
Why
just
does he want to
a
fund
man.
movies?
His family made money in real estate, and he decided he wanted to get into the movies. So there are there's this kind of gang of younger kids now from wealthy families who are really putting up a lot of money to make movies. So it's kind of him and this woman called Megan Allison.
Yeah.
And they're kind of frenemies because they're both sort of trying to outdo each other. But I think, Megan Ellis, she's sort of focus features. She's taken a couple of their directors, so she's doing Wes Anderson's next film.
And Steven Soderbergh.
Yeah, Steven Soderbergh. So
maybe the Coen brothers.
Yeah. So I mean, basically, they're young, and they've got a whole lot of money, and they're like, "Hey, director, you've established yourself. I'll give you $30 million. Spend it as you will." Whereas if they were going with a smaller production house, they'd be like, "You can have $20 million, but you're going to have to do this, and come back to me and talk to me about this." So it's kind of quite an interesting stage.
So there's a huge
transition.
amount of faith in Killer and in Killer's reputation
Yeah.
and working with really good talent.
Yeah.
And I don't know a heck of a lot about it, but there's like tax breaks or something in New York that I think encourages investment in film.
Yeah. So the industry in New York is just completely blown up in the last, I can't remember where the tax incentive was introduced, but it's got the city billions and billions of dollars.
They've actually just increased it as well.
Yeah, they've just increased the post-production. You used to be able to get a 10% tax break, and now they've increased it to 30%. So they are really drawing a lot of productions to New York. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Even given that, do you think that, looking at the films that they were making when you were there, do they seem like the same kind of movies that Killer was making that we were looking up at, back in the 90s and early 2000s? Are they still going along that same track, or have they had to change strategy a bit?
I think everyone's having to change strategy with just the way the global financial situation is. So a lot of the films and a lot of different, not just Killer, a lot of different people I met with are developing films that are south of $1 million, so smaller budgets, looking at different distribution platforms.
Yeah.
So Deep Powder, which is the film that finished shooting when I just arrived, they were financed and distributed through a scheme called Vugaru, which is an online platform, which has a whole slate of movies that they're developing, and I think they tend to be around $1 million. So that's happening. Web series.
Yeah, Killer. They're a highly adaptable company, so they're just getting together with other online content sites and developing web series, and I know that they're talking to all sorts, like AOL and Netflix and Hulu, and they're also branching into TV, like they did Mildred Pierce, which was on HBO last year, and acknowledging that TV is now more of a, it can be a highbrow art form, and so they got Todd Haynes to make a series, which was awesome, and I think it's just seeing what's happening, and they kind of move.
And
with that.
I look at something like Kill Your Darlings, which has got Harry Potter in it. I can't remember his name.
Daniel Radcliffe.
Or At Any Price, which is just going to play in Venice, and it's got Zac Efron in it. And I wonder if those are the kind of choices they would have made earlier on.
I mean, they still are very edgy.
Production
They're
companies.
still
Yeah.
very edgy films in terms of some of the
And they're
content
still
they deal with.
both of those films are directed by like directors. I guess Kill Your Darlings, he's a first-time feature guy, but I mean Ramin Barani, he's doing it at any price. They're still working with directors who are have very singular visions, who are very distinct. Like only they could make that type of film.
Yeah.
And I like what you were saying before, how it's not like killer films are moving to the commercial world. It's like those actors are like, I want to be in an edgy, cool killer film, and then they're kind of coming over. I liked how you pointed that out, because I agree. Like,
I mean, Daniel Radcliffe's coming off the Harry Potter franchise, and he wants to prove himself as being
an actor.
Yeah. And so he's really good in the movie, I think. So he's a really good actor. Which is surprising, because lots of people on the streets of New York were outraged at the thought of Daniel Radcliffe, Harry Potter, this English icon, coming and taking this American icon, this role.
But I mean, definitely still wanting a commercial touch to the film, because of course everyone wants to make money. And I wrote down the quote. I mean, it was in my blog. I got David Enohosa, who was the head of development, when I asked him what they were looking for in a script, and he said, distinct dictatorial voice, a contemporary story with some sort of commercial potential, but ultimately it's a story that resonates with them on some personal level that cannot always be defined. So I thought that was a good description of like what they look for.
Yeah.
And I mean, they work a lot as well with up and coming directors or established directors, or when there's some well-known actors involved. And
I think they do. They do take risks still. I mean, with taking first-time directors who they might see a spark of some talent in a short film. So they're not they're not going for established directors. They establish directors and keep on working with them.
Yeah.
But then they're trying to find new, fresh talent. So Michelle did things like this as well, compiling lists of possible directors for scripts that they're trying to get up, and looking at the criteria they're looking at. They are looking for sort of younger, edgier, something new and fresh, that is going to be new and push some sort of new boundary, whether it's political or aesthetic or
So they're not changing their corner, but they are trying to look at new ways of keeping that corner going, I guess. And that sort of, you mentioned relationships with directors, which is obviously a huge part of their business and the way they keep it going. But when we were talking earlier, you were saying some really interesting things about the whole way that relationships are the real currency over there, and that you observed that nothing got done without some sort of relationship being in place. And that's something we might take for granted here, where it's really incredibly easy to make a relationship with people. But can you talk a little bit about how you saw that whole New York industry working?
Well, here, you can start a conversation here with pretty much anyone, and if that conversation goes well, there's an opportunity there. But in New York, you can't just rock up and talk to anyone. I was quite surprised at how much of a hierarchy there was, and you definitely, even if you come from advertising or something, you can't just cross over between industries. You kind of climb up the ladder in one industry, and then if you want to come and work in the New York indie scene, you've got to go back and be an intern again and climb your way back up.
What was the example you mentioned about the new assistant who...
Well, Julia, the assistant at Killer, she's was really great. She was working in commercials and did this huge Levi's ad with Kerry Fukunawa, and decided that she didn't actually really want to do commercials anymore, so moved to New York and worked as an intern for a while, and then is now working as an assistant for Pam and Christine, but she's sort of starting to do some associate producer kind of stuff. So she really had to go back to the beginning again, and it was quite fascinating, because I think it doesn't work. It's not nearly as rigid as that over here. Maybe just because, and that's maybe one of the great things about we don't have this critical mass. You can be a bit more free moving between different industries. So,
What the other interesting part of both of your experience there is that you are both writer-directors, and it is actually specifically a screenwriter's internship, which is quite surprising in some ways, given that you'd think maybe it would make most sense to send a producer over into that environment to learn about how to produce films. But that's not the choice that Script to Screen have made, and I think that's really interesting. I'd like to come onto that, what this sort of experience can do for you creatively and in terms of your own work and what it does for your own creative thinking to have been in that completely different environment and what you can take away from it. I mean, both of you, we haven't mentioned it yet, but part of your internship was just reading a hell of a lot of scripts, isn't that right? You was given huge piles. I mean, what's their intake there in that tiny little office? How many scripts are they getting sent?
I think when I was there, it was about 15 a week.
15 a week. And
Yeah.
who's...
And that's all solicited as well.
Yeah,
They don't
so
take
where are they
unsolicited.
coming from, those scripts?
They come from agents.
Yeah.
So that was another thing. I don't know. I learned a hell of a lot about how much the agents drive
Yeah, completely different.
the
yeah.
system over
Yeah.
there, which is so different from here.
Even agents and friends and
Right, so these are people they have relationships with already. They're not. This should be at a certain kind of quality.
Yeah.
And how many scripts do you think you would have read while you were there?
I can't remember honestly.
I think maybe about 15.
Okay,
Yeah,
not heaps.
not heaps.
I would have read more than that because that's all I did for 3 months.
That's all you did
Yeah.
for 3 months was read scripts.
Yeah.
So what was that like? Tell us, what kind of stories are those American indie writers tuning out?
It really was just a bit of everything, to be honest. For me, anyway, it was just, I mean, a lot of scripts that followed kind of the formulas that you read about in script books and kind of had nothing extra on top of it. Personal stories, character-driven stories, family dysfunction. There'd be thrillers in there. Yeah. Can you?
I don't know.
It's a
I mean,
hard one,
when
'cause
you're
it's just
reading,
like
it
anything.
is kind of anything at that stage. But I mean, I think the scripts that I read, that they were, trying to get up or
Yeah.
trying to make. The thing that really struck me about them is that they were really stories embedded in characters and how, character-driven, and how people relate to their world and their environment. So kind of these great. They were great stories, but they definitely came from a point of character,
Yeah.
and they definitely fed out beyond the immediate story to say something much bigger
Yeah,
about the
which is-
world. And they all kind of had these sort of interesting, I mean, in terms of the aesthetic or poetic qualities to them, they were really interesting. Like this great film called Goat, which they're trying to get up at the moment, which Diana and I both blogged about. So it was adapted from a memoir by initially David Gordon Green, and then George Washington got really big and he got bigger projects, and the film, like his sort of the kind of film he could make went beyond the budget. He could make something bigger, so he chose to do that. And then Jeff Nichols came in and did another draft, and then Take Shelter really blew up. So they're trying to look for someone who this is going to be their first film, and they're going to really be able to make this huge impact with it. And it's sort of it's a frat boy film, and it's just the way it deals with violence and ideas of brotherhood really, really struck me, and it wasn't anything I'd read before. So it was kind of fresh and really alarming, but compelling at the same time. So I think that was what I was expecting, to get to read something like that, and that was the experience. And I think that's the type of film that they go
respond
after.
to. And they obviously attract good cast as well if they're really strongly character driven.
Yeah. So Magic, which that's another still project up there. So Sebastian Silva, who made The Maid, this is his next film, and it's kind of psychological breakdown film of some young kids going to a remote Chilean village, and it had Michael Cera, Emily Browning, and who else was in it?
Can't remember her name.
Oh, Juno Temple as well.
Juno.
Yeah, so I mean, just attracting these really great, and they're all the actors who are at the cutting edge. So the Killer attracts all these really fantastic actors to their projects, and that's one of the reasons they have this reputation. Actors know that they're going to be put in films that are going to really be to the best of their advantage. So that helps with the financing. So it's this endless, perpetual motion machine.
Yeah. And I mean, was it more for you, Michelle, because you read more of their, not slush file because they're all solicited, but was that encouraging or was it intimidating?
I think at first I found it really discouraging because it was kind of like, how can anyone write anything original? Like everything's been made. Look at all these scripts here. What's the point?
Yeah.
But I got through that day.
That's good.
I mean, for me, I just came away with it being like, holy shit, there's so much being made there. I just have to burrow down and like make my own thing with my own voice, which is the only way I could ever do something the least bit original, you know?
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, I kind of saw this huge world and it's kind of like one eye open, one eye shut kind of thing. And then now I just have to be like, okay, but what can I do?
And being a New Zealand writer director too, I mean, you know, it's going to be odd for you to write a film that's going to naturally fit Zac Efron in it. So how can you make a film that is still going to raise money and make it on the indie scene without using those kind of tools that Killer's got, I guess?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I think that's one of the discussions of the weekend, is that balance between, like, if you can write a story that's a balance between New Zealand culture but will appeal to overseas, then you try and do that, and maybe an international company will see the appeal and want to put some money in it.
What do you think it would have been like if you'd read in New Zealand, if you're sitting in your cupboard reading all these scripts and you read a New Zealand project, how do you think they would respond to something like that?
I think if it was awesome, they'd be keen.
Like awesome, how?
Amazing.
Like, I don't know, they were involved with a project in South Africa when I was there, but I didn't get to read it or hear anything
to them about that?
I'm not sure, I have no idea, I just know that they were, but
it would have
they
been
didn't.
something that the director, they liked the director and they liked their past work and they thought the script was interesting. And
could you though, because you're in a position where they were asking you to read this big pile and say how things were good, right? So could you imagine in what scenario would a story from New Zealand take the interest of that sort of indie world over there?
Just if they, I mean, if they saw something really special in it, I guess, if they, I don't know, it's hard to say.
It's just being interesting to be on the other side of the world in a completely different, admittedly as self-contained as New Zealand or some New York is just as inward looking, but to be in that international context and see New Zealand from that sort of perspective instead of from seeing it from inside New Zealand, and see what kind of stories really interest the international world and what kind of stories just seem like another story that seems to be the same as the stories they've got.
I just might be able to contribute something.
Yes, please,
here.
Fiona.
A couple of years ago, the Film Commission had a thing where we had a project that was in quite advanced development. Christine Vachon was coming to New Zealand, she was speaking at some event, and she said she'd do a couple of sessions with filmmakers when she was here. She didn't want to look at early ideas, she wanted you to get a few drafts in. You had to send in your script and a one-page synopsis and the usual stuff. And they chose 2 projects to meet with, and mine was one of them. It was a fantastic meeting, really interesting. But as part of the meeting, I saw this little script assessment that had been written by probably the American equivalent of Michelle and Catherine. It wasn't long, wasn't exhaustive. It was her immediate take on having read the script once. It's a New Zealand story. It's based on a true story, but I've turned it into fiction. It's completely set in New Zealand, all the characters in New Zealand live. So this was a young American girl, I'm assuming, reading the script once, giving her perspective. And what was really great about it, from my point of view, is that the fact that it was set in New Zealand, that was neither here nor there. What she was responding to was, what the story was essentially about, what was driving the key characters, fundamentals. She didn't say, I don't get this, or there's this cultural reference and don't know what it is, or I don't care about these people. She stripped it right down to its essentials and said, fortunately for me, this is what I love about it. And that was fantastic, because I thought, here's somebody who doesn't know me, doesn't know anything about my culture, and yet is responding to this purely as a story, as a drama, as a would-be film goer. So I would hope that best case scenario is if your story is working as a story, if it's got some attractive elements for people wanting to go out of their life and into another life, then it won't necessarily be dismissed just because it's from a place that people have barely heard of.
No, I don't think it would be dismissed. I guess my experience of working in London was that a story from New Zealand was only going to stand out if it really had something completely distinctive that British audience, different to an American audience in many ways, felt that they couldn't see in their own films or in American films. So New Zealand films that were very similar types of stories to American or British ones wouldn't get much headway.
Yeah.
But films that brought something else that they couldn't see somewhere else really stood out. So I guess it's sort of what that kind of company is looking for, I guess. And maybe Killer is just looking for that good story and the great director more, and that doesn't matter to them where it's from as much. But thanks for yeah. So it was intimidating, but you got over it. I'm really interested to see what you come back with from that now that you're coming back and working in New Zealand, and how you see that. You mentioned, Catherine, when we talked the other day, that actually it made you feel really positive about being here.
Yeah, well, the experience of I hadn't been to New York, so the experience of being in a completely different world, reading stories from that world, made me really excited about our point of difference. Kind of terrified as well, but kind of very excited in another way that we do have something down here that we do have really good stories, and they are really different to those stories, but then just as good. And I think the American market is so saturated, and talking to a lot of the people that were working on set with me, they were also writers or trying to get projects up, and there was just no way in for them. But to know that here, if you are writing and you're getting stuff done, and you're talking to people and trying to make connections, that you can eventually build up your story and start getting to a point where you are getting towards getting them made. Whereas in New York, I was really struck by the fact that it is so hard to break into the world. And it was quite funny, I went over there thinking about Tiny Furniture, the Lena Dunham film, and sort of the idea I had in my head was of this really indie sort of production, this girl who'd come back from college and wasn't able to, couldn't find a job and couldn't do anything, so she decided to make a film and made it with her family and her friends, and then getting there and this guy comes onto set one day and I'm like, oh, who's that? Because there are lots of interesting people coming onto set, so you always tried to figure out who they were. And David was like, oh, that's the producer of Lena Dunham's film. And I was like, oh, okay. I kind of got the impression that she didn't have anyone established involved with it at all. And then I was looking into DOPs for another project, and I found that the DOP on Tiny Furniture was this guy who's got a really big reputation, and then Lena Dunham's family is this huge New York art family, and it's all this exclusive world. So she wasn't, in fact, this idea that I built in my head of that it was possible to go out and get this indie film into the mainstream and get all this traction. Like, she is actually part of an arts elite over there that if you're not a part of it, it's hard to break into. But then at the same time, there is that, the mainstream indie, but then there's also the underground indie. So I went to the Tribeca Film Festival and saw quite a bit of stuff, but I also went to this film called Rooftop Films, which their catchphrase is underground films on rooftops, or something like that. And they were sort of what Killer used to be. Like, Killer now have a reputation. They are like a production company that are right in the middle of the film industry, and now there are these other films that are on the fringes and we're working their way in, but it is a really tough road, and I don't think many people make it. And I think the reason Killer is so enduring is that they've just got it right. Christine knows how to pick them. Yeah, how to pick them, and how to cultivate the right, keep directors, keep them working with her. Yeah.
Cool, that's a good time to see if anyone has got any questions for Michelle or Catherine.
Yeah, on that note of the directors, from the inside, is there any aspect that you guys maybe hesitate to work with them as directors, or is it is the impression we get correct that it's the perfect time for a distinctive director?
It is the perfect time. Absolutely. That's all they care about as well. Like, basically, their mantra is creating. Like, they don't care about anything else. They just want to create the space for the director to work with the actors. And that's their driving as producers.
They'll just fight so hard for the director. And for the director to get the cast they want, and do their thing. Really, it's amazing. It's amazing.
They weren't always so sympathetic to their crew.
The crew went through some tough times.
You mentioned that they are sort of like tracking directors all the time. Do the tracks reach the staff?
Not in my experience, no. They weren't tracking anyone from New Zealand, which was sad.
What do you think people would need to do to be tracked by Killer?
I think make a short film that was really, or a feature that really, I guess anything that really captured Pam and
what festivals were they tracking?
So they, at any price, Sundance, South by Southwest, and at any price has just gone, they're going to Venice with that. I didn't get the impression from the time I was there that they were particularly interested in Indigenous stories. That's probably one.
Do they watch short films, or do they wait for the buzz to come up?
No, they watch short films. I just read a quote from Christine on the internet leading up into this talk to say that if a director's approaching her now in this day, you wouldn't necessarily have had to have a short before, but now with technology, you wouldn't approach them without a short film. And they do watch, so I've watched a lot of stuff as well, not only reading scripts, but watching.
Yeah, that was part of my job as well, was to watch like all short films at Tribeca and Sundance.
Did you just sweep them all into the bin?
No, I watched them. No, I love short film. And to tell David if I liked any of the ones. Yeah, I did. And then I would.
So where was that pile coming from? Was it films that were they getting the kind of, all these films were selected for Sundance, or were they being sent in by agents?
Both. There were always films being sent in, and when Tribeca was on, I got the pass to go and watch all the films. And Sundance, there was a list, and I would contact the directors, and pretty much always the film is on Vimeo with a password anyway, so you can just watch it.
So just to follow up on Catherine's question, if your film had done well at an international festival and you were feeling pretty confident, do you think you could just send it to them? Or do you think that would be a way to make it to the bottom of the pile?
You'd need to get an agent first.
Right.
Yeah, you'd need to have an agent representing you who would then send a film. There's an Australian director who I won't name, but they were really interested in him, for instance. His agent had sent them.
His American agent.
His American agent had sent Killer his film.
So that's why he's a good American agent.
Yeah, so
I've got a question about script writing. What are their relationships like with the script writers? Like if the script's coming through agents, are the scripts pretty much at near final draft, or what are the relationships like once they're trying to get the script ready to shoot? Like, what are the relationships like between, say, the script writer and director and producer? Did you see any of that? Or
I know that when I was there, the directors were the script writers.
Yeah.
For the projects that I was therefore, and they were always rewriting and taking on feedback and having meetings and rewriting and yeah.
So right up to the time Kill Your Darlings shot, it was being rewritten.
Yeah.
With getting to read all the scripts, what would your guys take away from that? Was there anything that jumped out that you learned about effective scriptwriting, or in reading bulk, was there any learnings around making it gripping or drawing you through a script? Or
I think definitely an economy in big print. That really struck me. All the scripts that I read that really jumped out. I mean, as a writer who I think sometimes overindulges in the big print aspect of a script, I really read some scripts that they were just spare and really got to the point. And it was interesting seeing the scripts that were unsolicited and then reading the ones that had been through. Sorry, the scripts that were solicited but at the first stage and often got turned away to the ones at the end of the process that had been through killer development. They were very tight.
I just remember reading heaps of scripts, and for some reason the inciting incident was always a phone call. And I was just like, wow. But I mean, Little Miss Sunshine did it well, so you can get away with it.
But maybe that's why.
Yeah, maybe it's
Did
stemmed
you get a
from
lot
that.
of vampire scripts?
No, but no. There was one that's in that they've since
They're
shot
actually making
called
it.
Innocence,
Yeah.
which is a vampire film.
Yeah. Maybe that predated you about the whole vampire.
Yeah, possibly had. Yeah.
Where did the feedback to the writer-directors, who was that coming from?
When I was there, it was coming from David Inahosa to the writer-directors, and just a couple times for me, like I'd just give my notes and then he would agree or not agree on some of them, and then I don't know what he said in the meetings, but sometimes he'd come out and be like, they really liked your notes. So it's not like he was taking credit for all this work, but yeah, it was always just through him.
So you actually were having input into the script?
Yeah. That's why I'm excited to see some of these films,
Yeah.
to see like,
Did they
take my advice? Yeah, so no, it was they're very open and listening and yeah, humble.
Did Christine and the other producer, Pam,
Yeah.
do they give script development input?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Again, I was never there on the meetings, but I know that they did. Yeah.
And could you, this be my last question, was there any typical number of drafts in the development process, or was it just completely variable, or did you not know what draft you were reading?
I knew which draft I was reading, but
Yeah.
I didn't actually really.
It's very variable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just some had heaps of drafts and some didn't.
What draft did Kill Your Darlings get up to, do you think?
I'm not sure actually.
What
But
colour was it?
in terms of, I think we got up to, there were goldenrod pages, but in terms of how many drafts it went to after the
Before
shooting
shooting.
stage, I'm not quite sure. But it almost got made twice before they
So chances
Yeah,
are quite
made
a
it.
lot.
So a lot,
Yeah.
yeah.
With the internship, after it, has it changed the way you write or the way you direct? What kind of influence did it have?
I think that for the experience for me, being embedded in the production, will change the way I direct. I mean, before going there, I've worked on my own unconventional film sets. So just the whole process of being on a conventional film set and watching a first-time director working with his actors and his HODs, and also getting to know the people that he was with. So talking to the actors about how they found the whole experience. It definitely was quite enlightening for me to see that whole process.
For me, it was just how much you can get done in one day, and that, just the importance of networking really, but being genuine about it, because they can still see through the kind of smarmy, egocentric people. Like you still got to be lovely and genuine in your networking, because everyone wants that.
Yeah.
Like a good person.
I mean, and they have an incredible network of people that they work with. And yeah, they definitely do not suffer fools. And just, it really did impress on me the fact that you just need to work with people that you like and respect.
Yeah.
And finding those people is what's important. Tricky, but
Would you like me to make this the last question?
Do killer films make the kind of films you guys want to make? Like, if you were getting your ideal film production company, would it be killer films?
I would love to make films like killer films make.
Yeah, me
That's
too.
why I wanted to go. I mean,
Yeah,
the
I
films
love
are
the
so
films.
iconic.
Yeah.
And Boys Don't Cry and Far From Heaven.
Happiness is probably one of my faves personally.
Right.
I'd make a film like Happiness. I could.
Yeah.
Thanks, Michelle and Catherine, thank you very much for sharing your